one thing before we get started, I want you to lean over to a neighbor and ask him this question. How long does someone need to be in a country in order for it to count that you actually visited that place? Okay? Do you need to eat there? Do you need to sleep there? Do you need to, I've heard, go to the bathroom there? Do you need to do something so that you've actually been there? Turn to your neighbor and see what your person thinks. How long? What do you think, Kevin? Let's see some hands. Who says if you're in the airport in that country, you've been there? Raise your hand. Okay, not very popular. Who says at least asleep in a country? Raise your hand. Who says somewhere in between? Raise your hand. All right, cool. Well, I got a little story of me trying to claim that I had been to France. I took a trip when I was a senior in high school. I had finished up my internship here at Kauai Christian Fellowship, and I had, Kauai changed me, kind of maybe ruined me, I'm not sure. But Kauai changed me where I just wanted to explore. I wanted to see more of the world. I wanted to see God's creation. I wanted to be out there. And I had an opportunity to go to Northern Ireland, where a bunch of guys were working in youth ministry, and to be able to see what they were dealing with and some of the issues between the Catholics and the Protestant that are still kind of, touchy over there, and how Christ was being brought out in the midst of it. Well, I had a 3-hour layover in Paris, and I decided this is my chance. I'm going to make sure that I can say for sure that I've been to France. So being 21 years old, I decide that I am going to see the Eiffel Tower in 3 hours in Paris in the morning. Now, if you've been to Paris, you understand that Eiffel Tower is about 21 miles away from the airport, and it's not like a direct, easy, quite thing, and it gets even worse if there's rush hour traffic in the morning. But I'm 21, I don't care, I'm not going to miss my flight, I'm invincible. And I get my way, I get out of security, I get approved to go into the country, and I see the first gaggle of people that are all hustling you for a taxi or for a ride or whatever it might be. And I don't speak any French. And the guy who I'm talking to, I don't think he spoke a lot of French either. He's a Middle Eastern guy. And he just saying, motorbike. So I go over to him. Like, this will be an adventure. And by the way, it's the end of December, so I'm in my Christmas break here. And I go over to him and I say, hey, I want to see the Eiffel Tower. He's like, yeah. I'm like, oh boy, we got this. I said, I have 3 hours. He's like, yeah. I'm like, can we go? He's like, we go quick. And I take my roller bag, and he dresses me up in snow pants and a jacket. He straps my luggage onto the back of this big Honda motorcycle, and he just turns around and goes, we go. And we start on the worst ride I've ever had in my entire life. Now, I was a bit traumatized. I had my grandfather. He was nicknamed Wild Bill. My grandfather drove dune buggies all through Southern California, and his very, very, very favorite thing was to get his grandson, who he loved, into the front seat and try to kill him. And I was super traumatized by these rides, just going off drops on this dune buggy that felt like it was going to fall apart. And I had flashbacks on my motorcycle ride in Paris. There was snow on the ground, and I'm on a motorcycle, which those two do not mix well. And then we're in rush hour traffic, and this guy knows that he needs to absolutely fly in order to make sure that he gets paid and that I'm not angry at him at the end of the trip. No lie. There is a moment, I'm on the back of this motorcycle, and we are going in between two semi-trucks down the freeway in Paris. We are not going slow. We are passing everyone. And there was a moment between these two semi-box trucks, if I would have went this far, I would have touched them both. And I held on to the back of this guy. And I'm thinking, is he gonna kill me? Like, could he kill me without killing himself? And that was my only thought of comfort that I have is, I don't think this guy is trying to die. And our fates are really tied together here. And I think I'm gonna be okay. So I left tears in Paris of fear, so I would say that I visited Paris. We did end up getting to the Eiffel Tower. He took a photo for me on my little ghetto flip phone that I had at the time. Who knows where that photo went? And I made it back in time to fly into Northern Ireland. And that's my Paris story. Was I there? I think so. Well, hey, this morning we are wrapping up the book of Matthew, and I tell you this story for a couple reasons. It has some tie-in, but one of the reasons is we're going to fly through Matthew 28 this morning. And it's a beautiful chapter. It has a lot in store. Obviously, we were left last week with the death and the paradox of how death could bring life. And this week we get to talk not just about the resurrection, because that's, obviously why we're here on Sunday morning, like literally Sunday. But we're also going to talk about how Matthew chooses to close out his book with a command from Jesus in passing the baton on. The first point this morning is going to be about the resurrection, and honestly, we could do a year's worth of sermons just on the resurrection. There are so many aspects that have the deepest effects on our lives as Christians. We could look at a sermon or a whole series of sermon of all the places where Jesus had said, I'm going to go up to Jerusalem, I'm going to die, and I'm going to come back to life. We could talk about him predicting it with the temple, saying in 3 days the temple will be destroyed and they'll be rebuilt. We could talk about Romans chapter 5 that says, as sin came in through one man, so righteousness and grace comes through Jesus. We could talk about where Paul talks about without the resurrection, all of Christianity is useless. We could talk about how Jesus' resurrection allows us to be raised again in the hope that we have as believers. We could talk about how the resurrection is redemption and how the power of Jesus can redeem dead things in our lives. And all of these would be valuable sermons to give. But hey, we're on the back of the motorcycle. We got to get through Matthew 28 today. This morning, what I want to talk about is why the resurrection. There's a universal law at play that came into being in Genesis chapter 3 when humans decided to sin. And sin has affected everything in this world. All of us, even the most beautiful places and things, sin has affected it. And because of that sin, we understand that there was the ugly cousin that it brought about of death. Let's pull up Romans chapter 6, verse 23. It says, for the wages of sin is death, but the free gift of God is eternal life in Christ Jesus our Lord. Hey, without the sin, there wouldn't be the death. But since the sin came in, since the sin affects everything, the death is also here. I have a little graphic that I put together. It's crude. Please forgive it for not being beautiful. It's not my gift. Sin brings about death. The wages of sin, the things that we incur. Yes, it's the sin of Adam. That's where Adam and Eve, that's where it entered in. But we bring sin into this world. We make it worse, and we receive death because of it. I'm talking about the physical death today. Yes, it brings spiritual death along with it. It brings judgment and those different things. But the physical death that sin brought about, it's a universal law. But Jesus, let's flip over to that other graphic. Jesus got death, but he never paid the crime to incur the punishment. He received the punishment without ever doing the works that were required to get it justly. Because Jesus, without sin, comes into this universal law, still receives the punishment for it, but never did the crime for it. This is why Jesus was raised again. He broke the universal law. He came through this thing and was different than everyone else. Everyone else that had ever received a physical death, they got what they deserved. Jesus, in getting what we deserve, not what he deserves, was able to be raised again. Let me tell you a little story as well to kind of make this point. I have a cousin. I grew up in Wisconsin. He's still over there. And he has the most Wisconsin job ever. He works in a cheese factory. And he's a really smart guy. He went to school for production engineering and these different things. And he's one of the top managers in this company that sells squeeze cheese, but the heated up stuff. I have a photo actually of what his company does. Gale's cheese with these. Yeah, it's really delicious. I know you guys are all hungry right now looking at this. But he works for this company, and they do all the cheese in like 95% of the baseball stadiums and football stadiums all across the United States. And gringos eat a lot of cheese, right? We eat a lot of cheese. So he's got these huge factories that he's in charge of. And one of my times in Wisconsin, I was talking to him about his job, and he's like, man, we just had an absolute nightmare the other day. They lost one, or they ran out of one of their ingredients. Now, you might imagine these squeezed cheeses, they have a lot of ingredients, okay? There's a lot of ingredients in there. But when one is off, the whole thing goes wrong. And he said, hey, it's like trying to stop a freight train. We ran out of one ingredient, everything else is automated. Everything else is pumping, everything else is pouring out, trying to stop the automated system of these huge factories, right, that are pumping out this cheese. It's like, hey, I'm dealing with a freight train that just got piled up, and piled up because of the one thing. Hey, Jesus not sinning, but dying, stopped the freight train. It broke that universal law of sin brings death. Because he got the death without the sin, death could not hold him because of the perfect life that he lived. Life or death brings life. Judgment brings freedom. And yet God, Jesus himself, who could break this universal, has the power in his hands to be able to pass that to us, to be able to cover our sins, to be able to cover the punishment that we have accrued to us. Let's get into Matthew 28, where it describes the resurrection. Let's go verse 1. Now after the Sabbath, toward the dawn of the first day of the week, Mary Magdalene and the other Mary went to see the tomb. This is interesting, the reason why we as Christians and Christians throughout the centuries have gotten together on Sunday morning is because this is the day of the resurrection. Every time we gather on a Sunday morning, it very purposely moved from Sabbath, which would have been Saturday, to Sunday to rejoice the life and resurrection that Jesus has. Did you guys know that every time we come and gather on Sunday, we are thinking about that resurrection, and we're keeping it as a weekly token of that thing? It says, toward the dawn of the first day, Mary Magdalene and the other Mary. This is not Mary, the mother of Jesus, most likely. It's a different Mary that's mentioned in the gospel a couple times. But these two ladies are out, and to me, it seems like they're the only two that are brave enough in the midst of the political trouble that was going on to go to Jesus. And they just have guts. They're going to go, and they're going to care for the body of Jesus. But their plans get a little bit thwarted. Let's pick up here in 28, verses 2 to 7. And behold, there was a great earthquake, for an angel of the Lord descended from heaven and came and rolled back the stone and sat on it. His appearance was like lightning, and his clothing white as snow. For the fear of him, the guards trembled and became like dead men. But the angel said to the woman, "Do not be afraid, for I know that you see Jesus who was crucified." Next slide. He is not here, for he has risen, as he said. Come, see the place where he lay. Then go quickly and tell his disciples that he has risen from the dead, and behold, he is going before you to Galilee. There you will see him. See, I have told you. There's an account of a power and an earthquake, that's what it looked like when the angel descended from heaven to roll back the tomb. I wonder if it's the same moment that Jesus was resurrected, that the power of the universal law being shifted and broken by the power of Jesus brought about this resurrection. Jesus was not in the grave. He is alive, and he still is. You can't find the bones of Jesus Christ in the Middle East. It's not there. The ladies, they looked. They couldn't find it. The power that came for this resurrection, it cannot be overstated how important it is to us as Christians. And I love that there is like this physical earthquake that happens in the area, symbolizing this power. Then you get a little description of the angel and looking like lightning. And what a word to try to describe it. I feel like it doesn't encompass all there. And that he's so scary looking, this angel, that the guards are stunned enough to be like dead men. And that the angel reaches out to the woman and talking to her and just says, "Hey, don't be afraid. Something beautiful has happened here. Jesus Christ is resurrected." This thing that has happened, it changes everything. It breaks the universal law. It causes the pileup of the cheese factory because it changed everything in that moment. Let's pick up here in verses 8 to 10. So they departed quickly from the tomb with fear and great joy, and ran to tell his disciples. And behold, Jesus met them and said, "Greetings." And they came up and took hold of his feet and worshiped him. Then Jesus said to him, "Do not be afraid. Go and tell my brothers to go to Galilee, and there they will see me." I love that the ladies running away, even though they were told not to be afraid, they got a little fear with them. But the great joy that they're going with. And it's almost like Jesus is like, "Hey, I can't wait. I have to see him. I have to show him. I can't wait. I'm so pumped." And they run into Jesus face to face, the resurrected King, the one who had paid for the sin of the world. I could only imagine what Jesus looked like, what that moment would have sounded like. It was clear that the women understood by their response of grabbing a hold of his feet and worshiping him in that moment. What a beautiful, beautiful presentation of Jesus out of the grave to these ladies. And again, we see a command here. We say, "Go and tell my brothers to go to Galilee." Just like the angel had said, "Go and meet Jesus at Galilee." Now, sometimes as Christians who live on the other side of the planet from Israel, we think, "Oh yeah, they'll probably walk to Galilee in about 10 minutes or so, and then they'll be able to see Jesus." Well, I did a little research, and they're probably around Jerusalem right now. It's about 91 miles to Galilee. And would take you walking about 30 hours to get there. So it's funny, yeah, we kind of think, "Oh, go to Galilee, no big deal." Man, if you told me to walk 90 miles right now, I'd be like, "Oh my gosh, are you kidding me?" Like, it's probably worth it to see the resurrected Jesus. I don't know if anything else would get me to walk 90 miles, but that one might. But this idea of the time between hearing the news and that, going and seeing this moment in Galilee. Now, we know from the other Gospels that there was other meetings that Jesus had with his disciples. There's the disciples on the road to Emmaus. There's the apostles that were fishing, and Jesus says, throw the net on the other side of the boat. We know that Jesus restored Peter, and these things aren't necessarily accounted for by Matthew. Matthew kind of leaves it here as the ladies saw Jesus, and then that they're going to head up to this mountaintop in Galilee after a long hike. And I think the reason that Matthew does so is he wants to really point at the things that Jesus is going to say at the end of the book here. Because the end of the book of Matthew, it really builds with crescendo into being a pivotal moment in the life of the church. Now, Matthew accounts for a cover-up scheme that happens between the soldiers and the government. They say, hey, we'll pay you money if you don't say anything. Or we'll pay you money if you say that the body got stolen. There's a little cover-up that happens. But then we're going to fast forward to Jesus at the mountaintop presenting himself to the disciples in verses 16 and 17. It says this, now the 11 disciples went to Galilee and to the mountain to which Jesus had directed them. And when they saw him, they worshiped him, but some doubted. What? Hey, sometimes we read the Bible and we feel like we're on a certain path, like a smooth sidewalk, and then we just hit a monster bump in the road. And it might make us uncomfortable when we read the Bible. When I'm reading this and I'm like, oh, yes, the 11 disciples are about to see Jesus. What's going to happen? They got to the right mountain. They saw him. They worshiped him. Everything's going the right direction. And then they hit a pothole, kind of like they're driving through Kauai here. They hit this massive pothole when we're reading this. But some doubted. How? This is Jesus, very publicly executed, standing in front of what would seem like a very committed group. And I think what is being said here is, man, people have an incredible ability to doubt. No matter how much evidence might be in front of someone, human beings have an incredible ability to doubt. What a shame that they could be seeing the resurrected Jesus and instead of worshiping, they're doubting. But at the same time, I think it's a very human condition to be skeptical. Sometimes in the church, we're scared to say that we're skeptical of Christian things. We're scared to say that there might be some doubt creeping up. I think doubt really thrives in an area where we're scared to feel it. And in this moment, I wish that the doubters would have maybe spoken up, maybe done something, maybe addressed it, wrestled through what they're going through. But at the same time, we also know that when the goodness and the knowledge of Jesus comes to us, there are some people that they're just blind to it. They just don't understand. They think that it's all foolishness. They don't quite get it. And if there was doubt on this final day of the resurrected Jesus presenting himself, we're gonna run into doubt, not just in our lives, but in the lives of our friend and family that we want to know about Jesus. Hey, pray for them. Pray them through that doubt. Pray them through it. Hey, don't take it upon yourself if they doubt. If people weren't believing the resurrected Jesus in front of them, people are going to doubt here today about Christ, but pray for them. Pray that they get through the block that is holding them from understanding. Well, Jesus, in the next 3 verses here, is going to utter a command. And in this command, he's going to quite literally pass the baton of the kingdom of heaven. Jesus has been working with his disciples, but he's about to head to heaven, and he's about to say, all right, go for it. You guys lead the church. You guys do the healings. You guys bring about the gospel to the world. And it's quite literally this moment where Jesus is holding the leadership. He says, all right, go for it. Sink or swim, jump in and see what happens. I have a little experience actually in track and field. I went to a really small high school. I played football in high school, and my football coach was like, hey, you know, Tony, you're pretty slow. He didn't really mince words a lot. And he decided that if I went into track and field that I would, you know, work on some of my speed, and it would just be good for his football players to work on those things. And I was pretty slow, still am. But I was a thrower in high school. I'd throw the discus or the shot put, whatever it might be. And I didn't have to run very often. I tried not to run as often as I could because I'd always get last. But there was one track meet where they had this special event that they very kindly named the Fat Man March. And it's where they took all the throwers on the team and they made them run a relay race, right? Hey, this was a crowd favorite, seeing these guys come barreling down the track. I got a little photo of, not me, but just passing the baton. And the worst thing to do as a thrower was to drop the baton, right? And to be slow. You want to beat the other big guys, right? And it was always such a good time to get up. And, man, you know, there's a couple fan favorite events, like the 100-meter. Some of the team will come out and watch it, you know, and just be like, oh, our guy was so fast. This event was much watched TV, where everyone was out. It didn't matter if they were warming up for the next event, whatever it might have been. Everyone gathered for the Fat Man March, and it was a good time. So I learned something about passing the baton and moving it on. But what Jesus says here in Matthew 18 to 20, this is the Great Commission. And this is such a powerful and beautiful set of directions that he gives to the church. Yes, to the early apostles, but to us as the church as we continue in the tradition of the apostles. Let's read Matthew 28, 18 to 20. And Jesus came and said to them, all authority in heaven and on earth has been given to me. Go, therefore, and make disciples of all nations, baptizing them in the name of the Father and of the Son and of the Holy Spirit, teaching them to observe all that I have commanded you. And behold, I am with you always to the ends of the age. I love this passage. I think that it's really beautiful. You see this passage all over different missions organizations and things like that. But I believe it is a call not just to missionaries, but to all believers. When I look at this phrase of what Jesus says from beginning to end, he kind of starts with and ends with himself. It's a Jesus sandwich that he gives here. The beginning is all authority in heaven and on earth has been given to me, which is really important. Then he ends it with, I am with you always to the end of the age. And he sandwiches this command in the passing of the baton with a promise, with the promise that he is going with us and that he has the power and authority. And we need to remember in our work that it's in the middle of the sandwich of leaning on Jesus' presence and leaning on his power. Leaning on what Jesus has. You'll notice this verse does not say, go and make converts in all nations. A convert being someone that turns to their faith in the first day. But it says, go and make disciples of all nations. This is an important difference of of not just looking for people to get fire insurance from hell, but instead to grow people into Christian maturity, where they can know and pass on and be productive and have fruit in their lives. I also like that the word all is used so many times. All authority has been given. Go make disciples of all nations. Teach them to observe all that I commanded you. And then I will be with you always. That this is a big command. This is a big thing that Jesus is asking us to do. He's asking the disciples here to be on mission. Not to go on a missions trip, but to be on mission. A missions trip, yeah, that's fun. You gave 1 week out of your life to go and do some stuff. That's beautiful. That's wonderful. Being on mission is a lot more effective because it's 52 weeks a year, 365 days. He's saying, go be on mission to all nations, teaching all that I have commanded. Go to the ends of the earth. Man, when I think about it from our culture here, Hawaii is pretty much the end of the earth from Israel. We're on the opposite side of the globe. There's nothing further away from the Middle East than right here. And it's amazing what has happened over the last 2,000 years in how the gospel has gone forward to move. I would say that these apostles, they did a pretty good job of this worldwide movement of people being able to hear about Jesus. But yet, even in 2022, there are unreached people in little pockets scattered all throughout the world. And we need to be concerned about that. We need to think about how God's gospel and the power of Jesus needs to get passed on there. The power of Jesus breaking the universal law of sin bringing death needs to enter into groups of people that have not heard yet. There is absolutely a call for us, and I believe with our young people, to give everything and to go into another culture to share about Jesus. I don't believe that it's all of our young people, but I believe that God is raising up missionaries in this church that are going to be willing to go where no one else has gone with the gospel. I also believe, though, that we need to be on mission here. I think the United States of America needs missionaries because we are a messed up culture. We are a culture that worships all sorts of gods. And we need to know that there is power to break the universal law of sin bringing death. Hey, we can get better at this, but we're also doing stuff too. What's happening right now with those junior high kids up on the mountain? That's a response to this call, this command, that we need to make the disciples. We need to make disciples of our own kids, of the lost people on this island. We need to be engaged in the mission of God. See, God's work, his job and his occupation is to bring redemption. His job is to restore. His job is to take what was broken by sin and to put it back together in the right way. And we as Christians, we need to take up the family occupation that our Father does that he is so good at. And we need to perpetuate that thing. Hey, I asked if we could get Michael Kelly Blanchard to share a song with us, and maybe if he's around, he can start making his way up. It talks about the resurrection. It talks about this idea of going out, and we're going to use it as a sort of benediction for us this morning. Hey, in response, remember, Jesus changes everything. Death couldn't hold him because he didn't do the thing that brings about death. of sin. He has the power to break the universal equation that we've been talking about this morning. That call, man, God might be speaking to you and saying, I need you to be on mission. He might be saying to you, I need you to go halfway across the world to do it. He might be saying to you, I need you to be engaged right here, right now, with your networks of friends, family, and coworkers. I would challenge you that wherever God feels that he's pushing you into his mission, take that up and do the work of our Father, who is a redemptive Father. Do it in the Jesus sandwich. All authority has been given to him because of his resurrection, because of his life, because of his death. And he's going to be with us always. We lean on him as we go about to do it. I'm going to hand it over.